I was wearing that shirt yesterday, Megan.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I think I have 2 of those, actually.
Really?
I think so. Yeah, something about when I was there the first time or second time, or I ended up with more than one. I remember that. Anyway, so
Cool.
Hey everybody, it is December 11th, 2016, and this is episode 72 of At Percussion. I'm your host, Casey Cangelosi, and over there is Laurel Black.
Hi.
Megan, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Oh, just fine, thanks. I'm cold. I think we're all cold, right?
It's a little cold.
Yeah, we finished our juries today.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, so Laurel has done a morning of juries. We did some yesterday, so we had about 2 hours yesterday, 3 hours today, and then Laurel played a recital, and now she's doing podcasts.
Oh my gosh, Laurel.
Yeah, it's a way to
Our
go.
juries are tomorrow.
Yeah, you do them all in a day?
Yep, one day.
Oh wow.
That's what we usually do too. But so listen, our guest is a composer, a vocalist, a poet, and a visual artist. But what really drew me to what she's doing is her super cool new podcast called Listening to Ladies, and you can find that at listeningtoladies.com. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a podcast about female composers. So welcome, Elisabeth Blair. How are you?
Thanks. I'm great.
So can you tell us exactly what Listening to Ladies is? Sure.
It is, at this point, a sort of 3-part initiative. I use the word initiative because it's nice and general. Not quite an organization because it's mostly just me. But maybe one of these days we will be. So it's an initiative that sort of showcases women's the music written by women, contemporary classical music written by women, through online features, a concert series, and a podcast, which you mentioned.
Okay, so it's much more than just the podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, very cool. I noticed on everyone's page, it's pretty extensive. You seem to do a really good job keeping a lot of information on each composer.
Yeah, I definitely try to make the show notes page for each episode a place people can spend some happy time exploring.
Yeah, sure.
And
sure.
is the concert series, Elizabeth, is the concert series in the same location every time? And is that under the concerts section under your website? Or can you tell us more about that?
Sure. The concert series is a sort of a slow-moving animal. I had my first concert. I actually am based right now at Western Michigan University. So that's in Kalamazoo, Michigan, which is a couple hours north of Chicago and a couple hours west of Detroit. And so the first 2 concerts took place here because that's just how it happened to turn out. The first one was in November of last year, and the second one was November of this year, or October of this year. And we just announced today our 3rd concert, which is actually going to be in the New York State area. And that is with the collective called Vent Nouveau. And the call for scores is on our website. So that's pretty exciting. So it's basically, there is no geographic sense to it. It's just whatever I can make work. And if anybody would like to work with me or partner with me to do a concert of women's works, I am always open to that.
Very cool.
Yeah, wonderful. Can you tell us a little more about the call for scores you're looking for? Like maybe what the pieces are, what you're seeking, or what's in
Absolutely
what you're hoping to get?
It's a wind and brass ensemble, and there's a nice instrumentation list, and electronics. It's open to electronics as well. And we're looking for pieces under 10 minutes by women of any age and any nationality, and that is anyone who identifies as a woman. And they're due January 15th.
Yeah, so why did you decide to start this Listening to Ladies podcast?
Well, I think I'm getting better at summarizing this because it's a slightly long story, but I think I can do it pretty quickly, which is, for many years I was a singer-songwriter, mostly based in Chicago, and I was really active in music, and then I started moving into improvisation and working with performance artists and doing more experimental stuff. And then I started moving into actually composing music. And as I was self-teaching, I actually only entered grad school last year, and when I was 34. So first I spent a few years just trying to learn more about classical music and contemporary music. And the first thing I did was I went to books, which was a big mistake, frankly, because books.
All those books are terrible.
Those books.
You went straight to the grout.
There were so many very large volumes of every classical composer you'll ever need to know, and compendiums
or not need to know.
compendiums like this, and they would often have zero or almost no women, including like ones that focused on the 20th century. There was one that focused on the 20th century. It featured 96 composers, of which 6 were women. Mm-hmm. So yeah. I started, I'm a feminist. I'm always striving towards being, more woke and more aware. But it threw me for a loop. I did find myself thinking like, shoot, maybe I can't be a composer. Maybe it's not a thing women do. Like, it was not a thought that I welcomed in my head. It was a horrifying thought. But it was that thought, and then the combination of that, and then finding out, actually, everybody's talking right now about how the Met Opera House hasn't featured a work by a woman since 1903.
Right.
And is now featuring Sarajevo's work. But I happened to discover that back in May of 2015. It was an aside. It was mentioned as an aside in an article about the upcoming season, the next year's season at the Met. And I just was aghast, because in the singer-songwriter world, this isn't a problem. I mean, there's some sexism, and, sometimes you're asked if you're the girlfriend of the main act or something. I mean, there's definitely problems, like anywhere, but, you see representatives of all genders and races and everything in the singer-songwriter world. So this was just shocking for me. So it was all of that really inspired me and how it began was I just started a Facebook page, and I set myself the goal of trying to feature one woman composer every single day. And I didn't know how long I would be able to do it. Maybe it would take me a month and I'd run out, And then from, because I had to look online elsewhere from books, the world just opened up to me. All of a sudden, I was discovering there were thousands of women composers. And I've featured, I've not been able to keep up to every day, but I do feature regularly, and I've featured almost 400 composers since last June. So,
wow.
And I've got so many more, and people are writing me. A woman wrote me recently with a list of about 10, and I'd never heard of any of them. It's just, wow. There's so many women writing music right now. Mm-hmm. So that's what began the whole thing.
A friend of ours and my colleague here at JMU, and has been a guest on the podcast, Eric Genevin, he has something called the Composer Circle, and it's a composer a day. And he's been doing that for several years. And yeah, the thing I've learned is just like, whoa, there are a lot of people writing music, and not just a lot of people trying to make a go of it, but people like that have something to show and have a feature. He told me once that he's gotten emails before saying, why don't you feature more women? Why don't you feature more women? And he just says, I just feature what comes to me. If it's a product I can show, I feature it. So, and yeah, of course, he's featured plenty of women, but certainly, there's more. I don't know. Maybe does that mean there's more men doing it, or I have no idea. I remember an old Ali G episode. I don't know if you guys ever watched Ali G before. Like, it turned into all those terrible movies and everything. But the show was actually quite funny at one point. He's doing this interview. This really old dude, I forget which character he is. He might be his Borat character, I think. And he's doing this interview at, I forget, some university. And he's, of course, like teasing the guy he's interviewing. That's what he does. And they're talking about women. And the old guy says women are very smart, but they are not creative. And he says it with such certainty. And he's not like happy to say it. He doesn't sound happy to be saying it, but it is really amazing. It's like, wow. So are there some people still that think that's true or fact, or or what? Because I don't know. It just has never, at least in our generation, I'm sure everyone here on the podcast and probably most of everyone listening has never had this notion even enter their mind.
No, frankly. Yeah, I guess it's like pretty lucky that in at least the percussion world, it doesn't seem to be, I mean, there are more men doing it probably, just statistically speaking, but I don't know. I've never thought that like I couldn't do it or that a woman wouldn't be good at it, because frankly, the best soloists living right now, they're all women.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. But I do remember in undergrad my teacher looking at me before I graduated, and he said, you cannot end up and he said, and he qualified this, but he was like, you can't just be a wife and a mom. Like, you have to keep doing things. And that's nothing against, people who might just want to be a wife and a mom. That's fine. It's very difficult.
But like you're too good at this to just
you're too good at this to ever think that you could give it up and be fine. That's really stuck with me quick.
Yeah, I feel like we've had this conversation a couple of times before, and something I've been thinking about a lot recently. You mentioned so if there are more male composers than female composers, and there are more white composers, I don't know, living in the United States than non-white composers. Okay, for example, taking PAS Focus Day, there was that whole issue with this, right? All white males. Or we've been having this conversation in a chamber group I play in recently that had a call for scores. We really want to show that we are representing a wide range of composers with different ages, different genders, different sexualities, different color, different, very diverse. We want to be diverse, right? However, when the submissions that you get, if you have a much higher percentage of one, how do you deal with that as an organization? Do you keep the call for scores anonymous? And because then it doesn't matter if the best works are from the majority, but your chances of the majority being picked are higher, obviously. So how do you deal with that as a presenting organization? And I have my opinion on it, of course, but not everyone has the same opinion. And I think it's a really controversial subject amongst chamber groups or organizations. Have you guys had that conversation before, or what's your opinion?
That is an interesting question that you raised. That's actually going to be shout out to Muso Chat. You guys know Muso Chat? Muso?
No.
They're a Twitter conversation that happens, and they have a different host each time. And that's one of the questions I've actually prepared because I'm hosting tonight. Is
awesome.
Literally what are some practical steps you can take to address a non-diverse pool of applicants when you're doing some kind of a call or application system. And to me, when I was doing the podcasts, so I started off doing this online showcasing, and then I made a website, so it wasn't just a Facebook page. And then I decided to start interviewing women and featuring them one per episode and their work, and just doing a sort of really focused feature. And when I put out a call for submissions for that, I was really excited because my inbox got flooded. It got absolutely flooded. Just dozens and dozens and scores of women saying, I would love to be interviewed. I would love to be interviewed. And I quickly signed up many. And it was only after a month or two that I noticed, because it just took me that long to really start seeing that there wasn't much diversity. These were all white women. Mm-hmm. And they were almost all white women in their 20s or 30s. Mm-hmm. So that goes back to what you said about your composer circle. No, composers. The guy who features
circle, yeah.
Composer mm-hmm. circle, yeah. Saying, he puts up what comes to him. I think there's a lack of, I don't know if those were his exact words, but I think in general the responsibility lies on the person administering the call to to reach out. Like I just spent this afternoon, once I got this call for Scores Up on my website, I spent this afternoon researching, and this is only a start, but I spent the afternoon researching historically Black universities and which ones had music departments, and I emailed directly to the composition faculty in those music departments. And that's just, day one. It's a lot of work. If I just put the ad up on the composer's site, I will get a whole bunch of white women. Mm-hmm. But I have to actually, and the same thing with the podcast. If I had just taken who wrote me, no, what I did was I researched who I would like to interview, what women of color, and then I reached out to them individually saying, would you like to be on my podcast?
Yeah.
So I think that's my responsibility, and I think it's the responsibility of anybody facilitating something.
Yeah, to diversify your applicant pool. I think you're absolutely right. And that's hard. Yeah, like you said, it's hard. It's hard work, and I think especially if you have a far reach within these community. If you're posting, if your goal is to have a large pool of applicants, you're almost fighting yourself in that way too, because you're spreading the word, but that's making the majority pool larger and more to even not fight against, but to keep even.
I really liked, I think this goes along with this, but in your second episode, composer Pamela Z, she was a great episode, but she says that, let's see, I guess you asked her if her race and gender like play into how people expect her work to be. I'm not sure if that was your exact question, but the answer she had to whatever the question was is that
I think the question was just how have race and gender affected your career? It was a pretty open-ended question.
That's it. And she said, I loved her answer. She said it's affected, say, how critics what they expect to come out of her. I love that. Like she says something people expect that she's going to be composing work about her people and her struggle, when really her response is like, no, I have I'm not interested in that whatsoever. I'm totally just a composer. But because she's a Black female, they're expecting this certain type of, certain type of content to come out of her. And it even affects how she is reviewed. Like she says and I'm just paraphrasing, but she says, Pamela Z combines street smarts with soulful views. It's like, there's a white male composers don't get that type of critique. It's just it's a new thing for me to hear,
Yeah, vocabulary is important. I mean, there's a lot of fascinating research on vocabulary used in recommendation letters from academics for their female and male students. And, I don't, you said earlier do these kinds of viewpoints still exist? Of course they do, just like sort of Nazis still exist, neo-Nazi viewpoints and stuff. But I think for the most part, most people just haven't had the time or made the time to become fully cognizant of the traps they can fall into. When you're writing, let's say like a really great faculty member is writing a letter for their student, and just unknowingly use words that are really associated with sort of the female gender, instead of more appropriate vocabulary when they're extolling the virtues of the student. They say that they work hard, or I don't remember exactly, but they use vocabulary that they don't need to be using. And all of us have these implicit biases, and it just, I think in most cases people just haven't, when they're not doing what they need to do, it's more likely that they just haven't put the time and effort into becoming as aware as they need to. It's an education. You have to actually learn. You have to reach out. You have to ask questions. You have to make mistakes. You have to, learn. And we've all got so much other stuff to do. So it definitely takes some energy.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, I think it takes practice. Yeah, because I consider myself pretty aware of these things, and I think about them a lot, and but I don't always practice speaking in a vocabulary that reflects the type of equality and diversity that I always want to make sure I'm fostering. And yeah, I think it takes practice, and it's not something that I deliberately make time for in the day, but yeah, I probably should.
Well, speaking of the verbiage that people use, my colleague and I in this Arts 100 class, and you guys know who this is, Mark Rooker, who's our metal sculptor here, and we did the segment about his art that's going on the moon. We were talking about a very interesting feminist issue that we were talking about on the podcast, the whole Wonder Woman thing, becoming UN ambassador, blah, 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 which, man, that was a really fiery conversation with the students. It was really, really good, I thought. But something he mentioned to me just as we were walking back over, he said, it can feel like it's hard to be diverse, say on like a search committee or something, and it feels like, it should be about the skill, and it should be about it should just be about what they can do regardless of who they are, and that's hard, but it's so bad out there. And you can tell, the example he uses, the election, the Trump campaign is Trump, the Hillary Clinton campaign is Hillary. It's like first name, last name. One gets treated a little more casually, a little more lightly. And I thought to myself, well, was she trying to do that to distance herself from her husband, Clinton, and not just seem like another Clinton? I don't know. And he said, no, historically, that's what happens with a female running up against a male. The female comes, the plan is to come off less, I don't know, dominant or a little more approachable or something. So it's as simple as first name, last name, whereas the male candidate, has more of that, last name. It's more official or something.
Yeah, that is something that, not that we want to go down this political rabbit hole or anything, but
let's do it.
Yeah. No, that is something that bugged me, is that people were, and even people I'm close to in my life would say these things like, no, she's so mean and she's so da 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 da, and it's like, she is just assertive and speaking her mind, and you guys are just deciding that she's being a mean person. Whereas if she was a guy, you would say something else. Like, her opponent behaved worse and was praised by some of these people that I know. And it's just... Yeah, it's just, I guess it's what people expect. And then when they're not, when those expectations are not met, no matter how off their expectations are from reality, always end up a little dumbfounded.
Yeah, sure. Well, Elisabeth, you mentioned it's just you doing this podcast. I was going to ask you, how do you get this done? Are you traveling to visit these women? Are you interviewing them over Skype? How do you facilitate this? It seems like it's quite an undertaking.
Yeah, it is quite an undertaking. I was full-time in grad school last year. I'm now just taking 2 credits because I'm putting so much time and energy into this. It's part of the reason it's working out is that it's just taking so long. Like, I'm doing this over a very long period of time. It's not necessarily visible to the audience, but for instance, the next episode that's going to come out is, spoiler alert, it's Lainey Pfefferman, who is a New York City-based composer who's just a wonderful person as well as a wonderful composer. But I interviewed her last November along with several others that are going to come up soon. And just now, so that's over a year old, the interview. I do it when I was in New York. I was in New York, so I did these 4 interviews, and that was some of the very first interviews I'd done. So I take a long time. It's hard. I'm definitely I spent much of the spring applying for grants, and I lost a lot of my naivety in the spring because I didn't get any of those grants, and I thought the project was a pretty good shoe-in. I'm not giving up or anything. I'm going to be trying for a whole bunch more very soon, coming up now. But I had a lot of false starts. I had a classical music festival in Berlin was interested in producing my podcast, and that would have been great. And they asked for a budget. They asked for a sample. They loved the sample. They asked for a budget. They liked the budget. And and then they said, well, we just have one thing. We want to change the list of composers that you're going to be featuring. And I said, okay, well, and then they sent me a list of 8 white men.
No, yeah. Did they read your proposal?
What? So, they didn't know what a podcast was. Yeah, we've seen this before.
So I told them, look, you don't want to produce my podcast, but I need money. I'll make your podcast if you make it 50% women and throw in some people of color, please, as well. I hate to say throw in like they're a thing, but if you make your podcast more diverse with at least 50% women, then I will make your podcast. And they took a month to think about it, and they came back and said, nah, we know we don't have nearly enough women, but we're going to stick with the list we want.
It must just be people will never stop being curious about Beethoven, and they'll always be Googling Beethoven, so that will sell? Is it that simple?
These were 8 young emerging composers. I mean, maybe not emerging, but these were 8, in their 30s or 40s composers, living composers.
Oh, that's strange.
Male.
Yeah.
So I guess that's sort of a side path to the question you asked me, which was, I think you asked me, how am I doing this, or how is it happening?
Let's see. Well, I know in the Ingrid Stolzel episode, I think you open up by saying, a little bit about this podcast series, and this has been a little over a year in the making. And I guess, what was that year like?
Yeah, the spring was pretty crazy as I was trying to pull this together. To get away from the complaints, those are one-off events that have happened, the difficulties with grants and whatnot, and funding. But it has been one of the most amazing periods of my life in many ways, to get to sit with these women, to first of all get access to these women. I'm not any kind of a name in the new music world, and I am so honored to be able to sit with these women and listen to their stories and be so inspired by these intimate and powerful answers that they give to my questions. And I'm the first one to receive this. It's like a private lesson in life and career that I receive, and then I'm able to sort through it and give it out to everyone else so they can enjoy it as well. And it feels incredible. It really does. I mean, there was a period when I went to visit Augusta Ciccone Bates, who's 83, and she's I think episode 3, and
episode 4.
Episode 4, okay, yeah. She I sat on her front porch on this farmhouse in the middle of Western New York State, and it was just beautiful. And she was telling me her life story. I mean, these interviews are so much longer. They range between 1 hour and 5 hours. Like the Pamela Z interview was 5 hours of me in Pamela Z's kitchen, just experiencing so many amazing stories and thoughts. And then I pull it down to 30 minutes for the podcast. But it's just been an honor. It's been a delight. It's been an education, and I feel like I'm building a community through this. That's something that's really, really struck me, is how through giving something to others, I am receiving as well. And not just in good feels, but I've gotten 2 commissions out of this. It's just because people were like, oh, I love what you're doing. Would you like to write a piece for me? I don't even deserve it, necessarily, but I'm so grateful. There's some great things that this has given me. So it's been a powerful experience.
How are you able to I guess balance school? I know you said you're not full time anymore to be able to have time to work on this, but as Laurel had mentioned before, it's hard to budget time for working on things that are really important. And I feel this constantly, okay, I have to do my job, I have to do these other things that I committed to, but I feel like I have this passion, this mission, and I don't know exactly what it is, and it's coming out in all these different facets of my life. But how do you really budget time to make sure that you're on the right track to make that thing happen in your lifetime? So it's really inspiring to me that you're doing that, but how do you strike the balance?
Well, I don't want to present myself as someone who is striking the balance. Honestly, I'm actually, I've had a very difficult year, mental health wise, just because I am so driven, and I'm a very list driven person. I have a lot of lists. I have the today's list, I have the month's list, I have the year's list, I have the lists for each project, and I'm just constantly updating and like reviewing these lists like all the time. And
sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Actually, last Sunday I took my first day off, and it might have been at least well over a year. Like first day off from planning and organizing and thinking and scheming and recording and writing and all this stuff. Like I just took the day off, and then I did it again yesterday, a week later, and it was. I feel like my brain is getting better, but I think the way that I'm doing it is by working myself to my absolute limit and beyond, and I don't recommend doing that. So it is definitely, I'm still learning how to balance my own needs with this sort of all-consuming, fiery like need to do something before I die. That's like giving back to the world, you know?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you just my experience with this podcast. It's and not that it's I mean, I think ours is much more casual, and it's it's much more simply done, but
much more doable.
it's much more doable, I think. Yeah. And but I couldn't do it without Laurel and Megan and Ben's like weekly help, because there just has to be in fact, a friend of mine started a podcast fairly recently, got to 5 or 6 episodes, and then quit. So like, this is just crazy how much time this takes. But the thing he didn't have in place is the help from his co-hosts. And I know he's probably going to hear this, and I've already talked to him about this anyway, so it's no big surprise. But yeah, like that was the only way to do it for sure, because I think editing these episodes, and God, if you look at some of my episodes, you'll probably just laugh because they're so simple. But just editing them, I was doing 6 hours an episode at first, and now I'm much better at it. I kind of have a plan, like, okay, so this is Elisabeth's episode. I'm gonna download all the info I want to share about her first, and pictures to cut and paste and to overlay and all of that. Have all that ready to go before I even start, and then all I have to do is watch it, edit, and it takes about 2 hours, and I'll spread that over 2 or 3 days. And but I definitely, and Megan and Laurel can attest to this, they remember, it definitely got to the point where I was doing those 6 hours of editing. I was like, guys, maybe it has to be audio only. I can't do a video thing. I can't.
Yeah. How can we help you?
I know, and they're all like, how can we help? How can we help? What more can we do? I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know. But I just had to, really had to get used to it, of course, and get better at it. So anyway, I hope you find some partners as you do it more.
Yeah, I would love that. If anyone listening would like to help with any of their time, that is more than welcome. My best friend Christy's been helping me with the online showcase all year. She's been helping me, and which has been exciting for her, because as a singer-songwriter in Illinois, she's lives on a sort of a farm type place. She's never listened to new music in her life until this January, when I asked her to help. So she's been getting this incredible new experience as well. And she's curating the daily showcase much of the time. So I have her help, and I have a student who's about to graduate, who's going to be helping me once she graduates. But yeah, anytime anyone can spare is appreciated.
Sure. Awesome. Megan, you have something for us today. Do you want to share?
Yeah, well, as I was learning more about Elisabeth, I was thinking about other mediums that feature all women, and one that I've come across through my work with Rhythm Scene was TomTom Magazine, and it's a magazine all about female drummers. And it's the only magazine in the world that's dedicated only to female drummers, and it's online, but it's also, they print the magazine quarterly. So it's a 74-page full-color quarterly print magazine. But it's also a website. They feature and sponsor different events. There's a large social media community with a lot of content, a lot of educational content. And it's also an academy where you can take lessons. And they say TomTom serves as the ultimate go-to guide for the latest information about girl drummers and beat makers around the globe. But it's more than just a magazine. It's also a movement. And their mission is to raise awareness about female percussionists from all over the world, and hopes to inspire women and girls of all ages to drum, all while strengthening and building the community of otherwise fragmented female musicians. And they work to feature drummers of all ages, races, styles, skill level, sexualities, body size, and notoriety. And I love the part about raising awareness, hopes to inspire women and girls of all ages to drum. I think that part of the mission statement is just like underlined and bolded and italicized for me, because in having this conversation, sometimes I always come back to, in having the conversation about, is it weird to be a female drummer? Do you ever feel disadvantaged? Has anyone ever, and I always kind of say, I just don't think about it, and I've never thought about it, and nobody's ever treated me differently. And sometimes I go back to think of places where people have treated me differently, and I haven't let it get to me. And I think that because of that, I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do, but I think because of that, that's why I chose this career, because I didn't let it get to me. But at the same time, I do understand that it would bother a lot of people, and a lot of people have been treated much more unfairly than I have. I'm sure I've heard stories. So I think just doing your thing as a minority is huge, and you can inspire a lot of people that way. And there's even more of a mission to get out and inspire, younger musicians to in rural Missouri where I live. Like, if I go to a high school in rural Missouri or a middle school or whatever, and someone sees me play xylophone rag or something, that might inspire, someone to play percussion rather than to play flute or clarinet. Like I don't know, they might be expected to do. So anyway, tangent, back to TomTom Magazine. The founder and publisher of this magazine is Mindy Siegel-Abovitz. I think that's how you say her last name, Abovitz. But we had her write a cover story for Rhythm Scene once, and so I got to know her a little bit that way. She's a very inspiring person. And she was just featured on Red Bull Music. There's a series called Mavens, and it's a new web series that spotlights inspiring people breaking through and redefining societal norms. It covers the journeys, struggles, and triumphs of passionate underdogs paving new roads in music, media, sports, tech, business, art, and more. So you can find Mindy's episode if you just Google Red Bull Music and Mavens and Mindy Siegel-Abovitz. So a little bit more about Mindy is that she's a drummer, a feminist, and social activist who is currently using media as her medium. She would like to see the world as a better place filled with more compassion and understanding. She believes that can be done in part through better representation of people in the media. So the more we're getting to know Elisabeth here, I think you guys are kindred spirits.
Wonderful. It sounds wonderful.
Right. So you guys should check it out. It's TomTom Magazine. There's an online version. There's also a print version of the magazine. They also sponsor the Hit Like a Girl contest. I think we maybe talked about that.
Oh, yeah.
Before. It's the only contest only for female drummers in the world. And a lot of the winners of that have been featured at PASIC before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think role models are so important. Just seeing somebody who looks like you doing a cool thing opens up permission for you to do that cool thing. And it's just as simple as that,
Mm-hmm.
Well, I forget the quote exactly, but when we talked about the Wonder Woman thing, there was a quote from the creator that it said something along the lines of, as long as little girls are seeing women like not doing cool stuff, they're gonna not do cool stuff. So Wonder Woman's important. I was gonna ask you, since you seem to be familiar with that little news item, what did you think of that? Did you see that as a victory or as a not a good thing, the Wonder Woman appointment?
That's a good question. I don't think I came to a verdict on it, but okay. I think because I'm thinking about so many other things, but I was definitely leaning towards it being not. I mean, why can't we appoint an actual living woman? is really what it comes down to for me. Why does it have to be a fictional woman who wears a very sexualized outfit? So I guess I've just changed my mind. I do have an opinion. I don't think Wonder Woman is the right choice.
Sure. Okay, cool. No, I was curious. Let's see. Well, what else do I have here?
I have a quick question, Casey. I mentioned this right before the podcast to Elisabeth, but I wanted to give a shout out to the Women Composers Festival of Hartford. My friend Nate runs that festival, and I've heard a lot about it from him. It seems like a wonderful festival. And you mentioned that you've attended. Can you tell us about your experience there and any other Women Composers Festivals you might know of that female composers could submit to?
Right now, I don't know of any that are coming up like that one is, but that one is a lovely thing. It's in Hartford, Connecticut, and I went 2 years ago actually, and it's small. I mean, hopefully it's growing each year. It's smaller than you would imagine it would be, and when I say that, I want to just add, like, if anyone is thinking of going, please go. It's full of warm, supportive people. There's some fantastic, not just concerts of works by women, of all, it's such a diverse array of women's works that are performed. Also, age-wise, there are like 19-year-old students' works performed, and there's really, exceptional, professional composers' works performed. And the performers chosen are always amazing. But it's also just a really compelling and fascinating and empowering sort of conference type atmosphere, where there are really great panel discussions. Like the discussion that was there when I was there 2 years ago was on one of the topics was the very term women composers, and how that is an annoying and controversial term. Because if anyone hasn't given thought to that, who's listening, it's just, you don't hear woman doctor or woman lawyer anymore. So why do we use that signifier? Why do we use that distinguisher? And do we still need it? And it is a point of pride. And there were a lot of really great opinions. So there was a lot of thoughtful conversations going on, and a lot of supportive, wonderful composers and musicians. It's just a great event.
Awesome.
Yeah. Why do you guys think, I guess this question is for Laurel and Megan mostly, but why do y'all think that percussion doesn't suffer from this problem as much as, say, composers?
I think that it is a problem, and I kind of think that maybe we need to step up more, and kind of we are, by saying something about who's represented at PAS, or at PASIC, excuse me. But I don't know. I think we definitely are still in the minority, and I think that it goes all the way back to like the numbers of percussionists, the percentage of male to female in the middle school band.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I see. I guess I was
and I think it's getting better, but
yeah, I guess I was thinking we're in good shape because, like Laurel was saying earlier, Evelyn Glennie, Keiko Abe. There's so many women, that are, it kind of keeps going.
It's definitely getting better. But like if you look at DCI marching, our marching band, mostly DCI and WGI. And I bet if we took a percentage of the male to female ratio in the drum lines, or in the drum line versus the front ensemble, I think it's getting better, but I still feel like there are significantly less females in the battery sections always.
Yeah,
sure.
Well,
sure.
And I would agree with it, and yeah, I totally agree with you about the DCI things, and I think there are probably overall fewer women percussionists, but I would be curious if the reason some women don't want to do DCI doesn't have to do with like playing, and more to do with like, I don't know if I want to be stuck on a bus with a bunch of dudes for summer.
Yeah.
For like the various reasons, not to like turn this super dark into like women in society, rape culture kind of conversations right now, but Like that to me is the much larger issue at work, and all of these conversations about women. It's just like,
is it a safe space for these women to be in? Do they feel safe in
right.
it?
Yeah.
Right.
And to some extent, like, stories that were coming out about, I think it was Ohio State and their marching band doing hazing, and some of the stories the women would come out with, it's like, that's not okay. Like, someone should be arrested. Like, this isn't just like college funny business. People should be arrested right now. And I would wonder if that ever has anything to do with it. Like, I do remember in college being on the bus, to whatever away game, and the conversations were lewd, and people would just, like, one day I looked around and I was like, oh my God, there's like 3 dudes watching porn on their laptops right beside me. Like, this is not okay, but I was literally the only girl on the bus. So now I'm upset with me as I was, at a 17-year-old. Like, Laurel as a 30-year-old would, like, flip her shit, but
right.
Laurel as a 17-year-old was just like, ugh, and just went to the window and did my homework,
Right.
But yeah, it's like, I think, we have to start being a little bit braver maybe in some situations. And, and you're talking about like PAS, and we have to start trying to be a little more involved, and maybe not being afraid. And I'm like you, Megan, like individually, the majority of my experiences have been very positive. I haven't felt, particularly like treated unfairly at all, and if I was, it was over something else, not because I'm a girl.
Right.
Well, and something, speaking of that, I know that Elisabeth asked that question in some form, I think on most of the episodes, and the only responses I remember were mostly it was, well, I never really thought about it. I never really thought about myself as a female composer. I'm just a composer. In fact, I think it's Pamela Z says I was just playing, and Ingrid Stolzel said she was just composing for fun, and it's not like, oh, I'm trying to do this thing that only men do or that women don't do. They just, like, it never really crossed their mind. And but it also occurred to me, okay, these are all successful female composers. So which what is it? Are they successful? How many are not successful because they did encounter barriers? And like you just said, Laurel, I've asked female percussionists. In fact, I remember asking Julia Gaines, Megan's department chair, one time, like, so have you ever felt any of that, like, good old boys club? And she said, no, never. Everyone's only been really, really super cool with me. But again, there's a successful female percussionist, and I wonder how many, if there are unsuccessful ones that have really come up against that, and it's been a problem.
That's interesting. A professor that I know was telling me his frustration with undergraduate women who were taking composition classes with him, like, just very, very regularly and very reliably questioned their work far more than the male students, and the male students were far more overconfident about their work than the female students. And even when a female student's work was superior, she was very, she didn't think that it was legit and all this stuff. And he also complained that by the time they get to the point where they're graduating and are going to go on to do a master's degree, like, so many of the women who take his undergraduate composition classes just say, I'm not going to do this anymore, and the men go on to do it. And he feels like part of it has to do with that confidence and that questioning on either side, And so I think it's obviously a very large question, a large subject here about how we're raised in society and stuff, which things we are raised to feel confident about.
Sure.
So,
yeah. My father is a math professor in Utah, and he's been doing it for a long time, and he's sort of right around retirement age. though he'll never retire because he will die teaching class. He's promised. He really loves what he does. But he says that, in Utah, the Mormon culture, you get married, you have kids, the wife stays home. That's a very Mormon culture kind of thing. And he'll often see pairs of husband and wife in class together, and the man is really stressed because they're the one who has to get through college, has to get a job at the end of it all, and has to support the family, whereas the wife is often just taking the class out of interest and out of wants a college education. And he says the wife's always doing way better in the class, and he says, no, you should be the stay-at-home dad. You should have the career in this science that you're pursuing, because oftentimes it's interesting and kind of sad.
I'm really intrigued to see, when we are parents and have kids, maybe kids that are college age, that is this different? Because I really hope it's going to be so much different, just because we're so hyper aware of this and a little more outspoken about it. Because I think about my mom and dad are both pediatricians, so they have equal qualifications in every possible way. And I Elisabeth, when you said something about lawyers and doctors, it got me to thinking about my parents, because my dad, his name is Joe Black, so everybody laugh.
Why is that funny? Oh,
because there's a movie. Yeah. Okay. At the office, he's always Dr. Joe every time, Dr. Joe or Dr. Black. But my mom is often called by her first name, just Monica. And people will often not even say Dr. Monica. And she says that she just kind of gently says, oh, I prefer to be called Dr. Monica, if you please. They just continue to not do it. And It's the parents. It's the mothers and the fathers. It's not like, she has these rude dads coming in that refuse to call her doctor or something. But she says it's just some people just won't call her doctor, even though she has completely equal qualifications. And growing up, I remember watching her go crazy, go to work, pick us up at school, go to PTA, take us to church, take us to Lord knows all of our activities. And she's doing the same job as my dad, and then my dad was working so many hours every day. I feel like I didn't see him much until I was in high school. But yeah, it's kind of go you mom, and people should call you doctor. And, because she's doing all the things. She's got 3 kids. She's doing that. And she's a really high qualified, skilled, talented professional. And I kind of hate that she's dealing with that. And it's strange when I'm, teaching class and I tell my students, please call me Laurel. They try to call me Dr. Black. And I say, no, call me Laurel. Meanwhile, my mom is fighting to be called Dr. Monica.
Right?
Yeah, and it's just totally, I hope it's just generational, and I hope that, we are able to really change how that is.
It's got to be generational. Back to the percussion heroes thing. My heroes were Evelyn Glennie, Katarzyna Mischka. Those were the CDs I had. I had a Steve Reich CD when I was younger, but it was after Evelyn Glennie. It's that's who those were the kick-ass percussionists, those were the kick-ass solo marimba. And I don't know, I thought nothing of, I didn't pay attention to what color their skin was or what their genitals looked like. Who gives a shit? I don't know. It's so, and not to say it's not a problem out there, but yeah, it's got to be getting better, right? It just has to be. Look at them.
I hope it's getting better, and I'm sure it's getting better. Hope and I'm sure at the same time somehow. That's a little visit into my crazy mind. But I just recently read a study of children age 3 or 4 being given choices of instruments and choosing the traditionally gendered instrument for them. The girls were choosing the piano or the flute, and the boys were choosing the guitar or the percussion or whatever. And so I think that it's still a message being sent one way or another, and it's still a big problem in orchestras, not just with percussion, but with with the brass and the harp and things like that are just traditionally one thing or the other, one gender or the other.
Yeah.
It's still definitely a problem. One of the composers I interviewed, I'm not going to mention which one, but does teach piano to children and overwhelmingly has girls. And when I asked, why do you think that is? That composer was like, well, I'm sure it's just random. But I really don't think that it is. I don't think that it is. So I think that it is still a problem that we need to not assume that it's going to go away with time, is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, we can be celebratory that it's gone away a little bit, but...
Sure.
I wonder, it would be interesting to see a study of children choosing instruments, but also just students in general choosing teachers based on gender. I wonder if there be, I don't know, when I got here, well, it doesn't really make sense because my predecessor is a female also, but when I got here, there was one female in the studio, and now there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Absolutely. I'm sure that's got to be, that's probably a big factor.
Or at least grad students, I think definitely was a big part of that. Just like looking for, I assume, a female role model, mentor, someone that's doing, something that they want to do. And I don't know.
So maybe all the little boys in that composer's neighborhood were going to a gentleman teacher. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, and I think when it does get, if we can say this is finally over and solved, I think all the boys will be happy too. I know when we were having that Wonder Woman discussion in my Arts 100 class, the guys were just as frustrated too. They were saying, everyone was saying, oh, it's awful that women are expected to be this way and they're not thought of as being able to do as good of a job as a man. But the guys are frustrated too, saying, I would love it. I would love to have the allowance of, okay, I didn't get a job and I'm a stay-at-home dad and that's allowed. They're feeling all this awful, oh man, I'm gonna graduate college in 4 years, and then if I don't get a job and I can't support my family, I can't look at my wife's parents square in the eyes. Whereas if my wife didn't get a job, oh, it's like allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's thought of a little differently by different people, but that's tradition. That's okay. So the guys don't like it either.
Yeah, that's definitely always important to remember that sexism hurts everyone. It really does.
Yeah,
it really
that's
does.
the way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of, sorry, real quick. Speaking of female percussionists, you guys, I'm almost through this, and I want to bring her on as a guest at some point. So, and actually, my department chair told me about this.
Will you tell us the title?
Oh, yeah, sure. It's called Sticking It Out. Yeah, right. Sticking It Out by Patty Naimi, who's a percussionist in, I think, San Francisco Opera. And, so my chair hipped me to it. And again, had nothing to do with,
awesome.
Oh, hey, this is about a woman. It's just no, it's a story about practicing your ass off and winning auditions and working really hard. It's nothing to do with male or female or anything.
Yeah.
It's a cool book so far.
Well, I think there's sexism goes both ways. I hate those phrases well, just man up and deal with it. Or I was reading an article in a running magazine this morning, and it opened with some dude was yelling to somebody else on the track about just stop running like a girl and take your tampon out and run fast. And what? That's not okay. Yeah, and it's kind of gross. But yeah, the idea that you can't be a man and be sensitive is ridiculous, because owning up to emotions is healthy. And I feel like we now have some of these societal issues that we do because or not necessarily us, but people older than us have kept saying and then taught us to say that men should be tough and man up and not show signs of weakness and things. And I hope that changes too. I don't know how to make any of that change.
Yeah. Hey, well, Elisabeth, on the podcast, you always end the episode by asking your guests if they have any advice for females who want to be composers. And I thought it would be a cool way to end our show, just to ask you, now that you're a composer yourself, and I imagine you've really taken a lot from this experience. And what's the answer to that in your mind?
Advice to to women composers?
Yeah.
That's funny. It's startling to have the questions turned on me. my own question. Oh gosh. I mean, I've had so many inspiring answers from the women. I've only put out 5 episodes so far, but I've interviewed 21 women so far. So I've gotten a deluge of great advice. I think, as far as the question goes of like the question that I've struggled with, can I do this even though I'm a woman and I didn't see women around me doing it? The internet is a beautiful place and mentorship is a beautiful thing, and finding somebody who inspires you, even if you aren't able to directly contact them, and sort of patterning yourself off them. That's actually how I became a singer-songwriter. I patterned myself off of an amazing singer-songwriter named Sandy Denny, who died very young in the 70s. And I think, having somebody that you really look up to and you learn all their work, and then, if they're alive and you can actually contact them, that's also fantastic. And as Ingrid Stolzel said in that episode, you never know. You might write somebody like big in the scene and you never think they're going to write you back, but maybe they do. Maybe they want to hear that too. Maybe they want to hear that you look up to them and that you enjoy their work and that you want to learn from them. Maybe that's what they needed in that moment. And I'm quoting her directly there.
Yeah, she says, find a mentor. Don't be shy. It may be what they need too.
That's cool.
Yeah. So just, I guess, this is a roundabout way of saying, listen to my episodes and get the advice from the incredible women that I've been fortunate to speak with, and educate yourself and reach out.
Cool. Yeah, great. Well, Laurel, did you find a quote?
Oh, yeah, I did. So, I found myself looking for, just anything about Clara Schumann. She's kind of always been one of my favorite, historical figures in classical music. And something I found was a review of her in Robert Schumann's journal, the one that he published as Florestan and Eusebius, as all the music nerds out there know. And so he's writing about her soirees for piano. This is Opus 6. These are piano solos, and she wrote them when she was 17. And I'm just reading from a little part of the review here. Let Bach penetrate to a depth where even the miner's lamp is threatened with extinction. Let Beethoven lash out all the clouds with his Titan's fist. Whatever our own time has produced in terms of heights and depths, she grasps it all and recounts it with a charming, maidenly wisdom. And about the piece specifically, and I love what he says here. Let me find it. Well, now I can't find it. But he writes basically that, I'm so sad, I want to find it, about, she writes, the most sorrowful happiness and the most, that you can be happy in pain and sad when happy about this particular piece of music. So yeah, that's today's little blurb. Robert talking about Clara.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Well, I have a Sofia Gubaidulina quote. So I know we're not supposed to double dip like this, but I'm going to make an exception and break the rules a little bit. She says, I'm a religious Russian Orthodox person, and I understand religion in the literal meaning of the word, as in religio. That is to say, the restoration of connections, the restoration of the legato of life. There is no more serious task for music than this. I thought that was cool.
Wow, the legato of life.
The connected. Yeah, make it all connected. And yeah, that's a really nice idea because it's like hidden as a religious quote, but it's not at all. So That's from Composer Snapshots, Sofia Gubaidulina. Anyway, hey, Elisabeth, thanks for giving us your time, and you're crazy busy, and congrats on the podcast. I'm excited to find it now while it's young, and I don't know, hopefully some of our people go give a listen. So
yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah. Best of luck with
lovely.
everything. Keep us updated.
I will.
Yeah.
I'll be listening. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Me too.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Take it easy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.